Good morning, everyone. Phoenix Hawking here. It's Monday morning, about 8 o'clock, and I thought I would do something a little different for you today. Ordinarily, I start out reading the first chapter of my new book, or part of a story from one of my books. This time, I thought I would read you a chapter that comes kind of towards the end of Becoming Grace. So, are you ready? This one's kind of different for me, so enjoy. It's actually chapter 17 of Becoming Grace. It's called Somewhere. Grace was somewhere. She wasn't quite sure where, as the location changed every so often. Sometimes she was on the ceiling, looking down at a young girl who seemed to be in distress. Sometimes she went to the places she used to go in her mind when her father was doing those things to her. And sometimes she just was, with no thought, no action, no direction on her part required. It was pleasant here. She remembered it as one of her favorite places she had created in her mind. It was a library, overlooking the ocean. A huge picture window looked out onto a calm sea, sailboats on the water, dolphins and whales jumping and playing, birds flying overhead. The room itself was filled with books, floor to ceiling. In the center of the room was a large round table with a vase of roses in the middle. And over here in this corner, an overstuffed chair with an end table beside it. A book lay, open-faced, on the end table. She went to pick it up, but someone stayed her hand. Beside her was not a person exactly, more like a being, a presence, a soul. Not yet, the being said. Acceptance. There was no fight in Grace, no discord, no conflict. Curiosity, yes. When? She asked. Not yet, the being repeated. Once again, Grace was on the ceiling, looking down at the girl in distress. People in white coats were very busy trying to help the girl, but there was nothing to do here. She floated away and found herself in another room, again looking down as if from a great height. The people in this room were also in distress, though it was a different type. They seemed to be waiting, quiet. The room was full. She recognized them, knew them, and different emotions whirled around her, love and pain and fear. Again, acceptance of what was. The emotions flitted through her, but did not stay. The being was beside her again, and then she was in a room she did not recognize. It was a huge room, an enormous room. As far as the eye could see, the room was filled with people, with souls who were prostrate on the ground, sobbing. Grace turned to the being. What is this place? This is the room of regret, the being answered. God has forgiven these souls, but the souls have not forgiven themselves. Sometimes they choose to remain here to pray for the souls they themselves have harmed. Sometimes they are waiting for those souls to forgive them. All around Grace, sobs and prayers assailed her ears. She felt heavy here, heavy and dark and sad. A few feet from her was a man she recognized, her father. She walked to the man and stood before him. He looked up, his face contorted in agony. "Forgive me," he begged. "Forgive me." Grace backed away. "How can I?" she cried. "How can I forgive you after what you did to me?" "Will you refuse then?" the being asked sadly. "Will you leave his soul here to bear his agony forever?" Grace looked at the man at her feet, and to her surprise, she felt her heart fill with pity. She remembered the Betsy Wetsy doll he had given her for Christmas, and the birdhouse he had built for her in the backyard. She remembered bedtime stories and hot chocolate, and him so patiently teaching her to ride a bike. The evil things he had done clung to him like leeches, suffocating him, smothering him in guilt. She put a hand on his shoulder, her own eyes filled with tears, her heart overflowing with unexpected compassion. "I forgive you," she whispered. Her father smiled, then disappeared. Grace felt lighter. A woman caught her eye. She was one of the women who had been at the hospital. Grace looked curiously at the bean. "But she isn't dead, is she?" "No, she is not dead." "Then why is she here?" "She is here because the living need forgiveness too. Her pain began long before you were born. She has never stopped loving you, but her soul is not free. She writhes in torment every day from the wrong she did to you. Will you leave her in her distress?" Grace shook her head. "But I hate her," she said. "Do you?" asked the bean softly, sadly. "She is your mother." The face of Mother Mary Elizabeth looked up at her, wordlessly pleading. She rocked back and forth, tears streaming down her face, her mouth open, praying. Grace's heart softened yet again. She brushed her hand through the woman's hair, so like her own, and said, "I forgive you." Grace became lighter still. The room dissolved, and Grace and the bean were in another room, equally large but filled with light. "Where are we?" "This is the room of prayers." All around she saw souls whose prayers winged themselves to heaven. She saw the people who had been in the room at the hospital. "For me?" The bean nodded. "For you." The scene changed again, and she found herself in another large room. It seemed to be filled with row upon row upon row of filing cabinets. She was standing in front of one with the word "Grace" on it. She looked questioningly at the bean. The bean nodded. Grace opened the drawer. It was almost empty. "This is for you to fill," the bean said. "Fill?" "To fill. With life, with love, with grace. You need to go back." The scene changed again, back to the hospital where people were working on the girl in distress. It was not a pleasant sight. "Do I have to?" "It is your choice, of course," the bean answered. "But you have work yet to do, and your baby needs you." Grace found herself standing next to a team of doctors, working feverishly over a tiny infant. There were tubes and machines and dismay as the people worked. Grace knew they were trying to save the baby's life, and suddenly Grace knew what she needed to do. "Will it live?" she whispered. It seemed as if the entire world waited for the answer, not breathing. "She will live." Relief flooded Grace's entire being with joy. For her, yes, I'll go back. The bean nodded again. "It will not be easy, but know that you will never be alone. God walks with you every day, even when the way seems dark." The bean held out its hand. In it lay a small golden ball. Grace took the ball and felt its weight in her palm. "What is it?" "Put it in your heart, for this is strength which you will need for the days ahead." Grace closed her eyes. The ball radiated a peaceful warmth, so Grace held it to her chest, where it disappeared into her heart. Bewildered, Grace opened her eyes, but the bean was gone. There you go. Chapter 17, Becoming Grace. I hope you enjoyed it today, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and that God walks with you all day today, as he does every day. God bless you. Bye-bye.